have been said by politicians. Um, the inspiration for him is such that many readers will probably say, well, hang on, but where were his red budgie smugglers? Hi, I'm Susie Allanson. I am an author. My most recent book is Genevieve Knows Too Much. Genevieve Knows Too Much takes place in a slightly off kilter world. It's a bit like ours, but not quite. And the extreme religious right Prime Minister, Julian Pope, in cahoots with the Archbishop Johnny Bell, has done some things that have caused women to be very distressed, very angry, and many are dying. So this book is about him getting his comeuppance, really, and Genevieve being a key person in that. Genevieve Parker is drop dead gorgeous Genevieve, who is the lowdown on TV news anchor. And she's absolutely delightful. She is the favourite. She plans meticulously. She's a perfectionist, and then basically flies by the seat of her pants. And the whole setup is one that is awfully outrageous, quite satirical, although things in the real world here seem to be catching up, unfortunately. So, yes, the tables are very much turned against misogyny, and it's a way of people being able to think about some very serious issues, especially affecting women, but also imagine what it could be like if we actually addressed misogyny in a very direct way. This book deals with all serious issues that I dealt with when I was being a clinical psychologist for 35 plus years. And I was working at an abortion providing clinic for the majority of that time, where women were being harassed outside the clinic, where we had our security guard murdered. And it took 14 years from the murder of our security guard to get legislation that would protect women from harassment from religious zealots out on the public footpath. And I guess during that whole long process, I was thinking, well, this is just absurd. How hard should this be? Why don't we treat women well? And so I wrote non-fiction books, and they were relatively easy and time constrained. There was a beginning, there was a middle, there was an end, and I wrote about the murder. I wrote about us successfully getting safe access zones around abortion clinics, which went all the way to the High Court. But writing fiction is something very playful, and you can look at the absurdities and draw out the contradictions, the hypocrisy in people, in our society. So I basically found that that was a much more fun way to look at some very serious issues, but also bring people along with me, because it's quite a ride. Genevieve Knows Too Much, quite a ride. We're dealing with abortion having been criminalised. We're looking at domestic violence. Poor Genevieve, she is so competent and beautiful in her job, but her personal life is an absolute mess. And she keeps on being attracted to these men who are charmers, but are also abusers. She has other losses and grief and scenarios that she needs to work through as well. I guess also the other issue is the role of therapy, because Genevieve has just begun in therapy, and we know that therapy, especially early on, can be a bit of a spanner in the works. Hopefully a helpful spanner, but a spanner in the works, because people are asked in therapy to stop and sit with feelings and events in their life that they've been madly racing away from. And that is exactly Genevieve. And so, unfortunately for Genevieve, some cracks start appearing. I think a sense of humour is partly self preservation. Um, if you can't laugh at things, then you do end up crying, you end up banging your head against the wall. And we human beings, we are a funny lot. We really are. And so I just feel like I was being, although things may seem a bit exaggerated, in fact, a lot of the things that, for example, Prime Minister Julian Pope does and says have been said by politicians. Um, the inspiration for him is such that many readers will probably say, well, hang on, but where were his red budgie smugglers? Or they might say, hang on, where is his happy clappy religion? That's what it should have been. Or where is his orange skin? I mean, we have been surrounded in the world by these extreme religious right leaders um, who don't represent anywhere near the majority of the rest of the world, the rest of the humankind. I think it's a combination, although I do have to say that when Tony Abbott was in power, uh, because he was threatening so many limitations on women's access to abortion, the Victorian women in particular really rallied. And so, if it wasn't for him, we may not have got abortion decriminalised. It may not have all happened around in every state and territory. That we then might not have been able to have got the safe access zones, which have rolled out all around Australia. So, yes, look, I did have a particular, he was a particular favourite of mine and a particular inspiration, but certainly we've seen many, many others. And look, the other reason, I guess, writing Julian Pope, he just wrote himself. And as an author, they're your favourite characters. So I think he's actually my favourite character, even though he's awfully outrageous and at times pathetically vulnerable. But he just wrote himself. To get inside Julian Pope's head was really very easy. I mean, I've spent, close to 30 years working in the abortion area. We had religious extremists standing out the front of the clinic all the time. You couldn't avoid them going to work. You saw the posters, they would sidle up beside you and say all sorts of not very nice things to you. And as part of my research and writing Empowering Women especially, I had to revisit everything that politicians had been saying. And I was highlighting the misogyny there. And so it was very easy to get inside his head. And of course, I've exaggerated some areas and made him a comical figure as well as a very dangerous one. Genevieve was inspired by a couple of news anchors that we have, and one actually was a Channel 2 one, Mary, and I've forgotten her surname, but she has the most divine voice, just smooth as silk, always seems to be unrushed, even though she's talking about all these nasty things in the world. And that's Genevieve. She's always unrushed, makes everything sound lovely. And yet I just feel so sorry for Genevieve because she's confronted in her job every day with the worst of humanity. The news is all about disasters, catastrophes, people doing the wrong thing, horrible crimes. And here's poor Genevieve anchoring that. I used to have many beautiful, competent, clever young women, and by young, being my age, I mean, 40s or younger, coming through the door to consult me. They were just beautiful, beautiful women. They would come to see me when they were in a crisis, and suddenly you would see that somehow they were getting in themselves always involved with men who were treating them very poorly. And so that was a big inspiration for Genevieve, that in terms, and the way in the book, you know, you're with Genevieve a lot when she's anchoring, but there are also some characters who observe her from their lounge room, and it's like she's popped in for a cuppa and she's a special friend because of the way the television or any sort of screen frames a person like Genevieve. Uh, so no one really realizes um, all the pain and anguish that she's going through. So I think it was very much inspired by all those beautiful women who, once they got in the therapy room, they really did a lot of excellent work and ended up much happier. I did begin my fiction writing while I was still working as a clinical psychologist, and then that was put aside to write empowering women, but that only took about 9 months, really, because, as I say, non-fiction is so much easier. But with fiction, I'm of the ilk where I think I have an idea, um, and then the characters tend to lead me elsewhere. And so I very much follow my characters. I've learnt from my wonderful author mentor, Miff Jones, and I would advise every writer to have a really good author mentor. But I've learned from her that at times I need to rein in a character. At times, I need to have them meet a different character who will perhaps make them a little more subtle or introduce something else. But in general, I do follow my characters. Oh, I love Leanne Moriarty, Trent Dalton, um, Joyce Carol Oates. She's extraordinary. And of course, Miff Jones. I mean, her book Leap is still my favourite one. And that was the book that I read that when I went, yep, she's she's the person I want to mentor me. Uh, so, and of course, I read a whole range. Um, yes, and I'm very bad at remembering authors' names, so I better stop there, I think. Yes, yes, there's another one coming out next year that, in fact, I wrote before this one, and worked a lot on with Miff. And I've got another one that I've started writing, but it's sort of in a drawer at the moment. But I think I know where I'm going, and I might even need to do a bit of research for that one. Whereas with these other two, because it's based on all of the work that I've done, it really just coalesces quite organically, and research is just little minor things. Oh, thank you so much. This is your bookshop is my bookshop, my local bookshop, and so it's just been an absolute pleasure.